Hey everybody, welcome to the Fired Up with CJ show. Today we have Paul Selig and we're talking about his book, The Book of Knowing and Worth, and we're also talking about his book, The Book of Love and Creation. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's really fun to have you here. This is, as we were talking about, the book really does, when you read the books, they really change your vibration. If you're at all energetically sensitive, which I am, when I've been reading these books, I've noticed a shift. You know, when you say shift into higher frequency, and I read some of the commands in your book, I feel it. It's pretty amazing. And you're saying you feel that too. Do you feel that too when you reread the passages?
No, not when I read the passages, but when I'm actually dictating the book, the energy is coming through, and the guides say that the books are energetic transmissions. So I feel the energy as it's all coming. Mm-hmm. When I pick up the book now and I look at it, I can actually sort of, have the encounter with it as well. But no, it's a very different process for me. I'm so in the energy when the dictation for the books is happening that when it's over, I'm just going, what the hell was that? Did that make any sense? And then I have to trust that what they said was happening isn't happening. But they're really talking about an encoding that happens with the books. The books are actually, energetic attunements to the vibration that the guides are working with.
And that's what you mean by an energetic transmission. Like I know I've done Reiki before, so they have to attune you to the energy so you're familiar with the vibration and you can feel it experientially. Is that what you mean by an energetic transmission?
I think it's a similar thing to that. I mean, I think Reiki is an attunement, and you can go and you can be attuned by a teacher, and my guides actually are attuning the readers. They say through the text. When people do workshops with me, the guides attune the groups there, and they say, I can only be there, in one place at one time. The book itself is the attunement. All of the books are actually. Mm-hmm. So when people are reading the book, they're actually having an experience of the energy working with them to support them in lifting their own frequency. Mm-hmm. So I think it's similar to, say, a Reiki attunement, although I don't feel that that's the energy necessarily that they're working with.
Yeah, no, they're not necessarily with a Reiki frequency, but it's still an energetic transmission of some sort that's actually, when I'm when my eyes are reading this book, I'm reading this, and then through reading the book, or do you think you said just by holding the book you get a transmission?
Well, I've heard that. I mean, that's not been my experience, but actually a lot of people that find the book say that the book falls off the stand in the bookstore in front of them, or they feel the book vibrating. And I've heard of people that are sort of, having these experiences that, I scratch my head, when I read these stories. Right. Some woman posted some story on the internet that was then sent to me, where she said, she bought the book and she left it on the floor, and her toddler went up to the book and picked up the book and said, "This is a magic book." So these kinds of things are happening all over the place. Yeah. All I know is I'm the guy that sits in the chair, and I'm there for the dictation. And what the guides say the books do seems to be the experience that the majority of the readers are having with them, which is really, they're transformational experiences. They move beyond an intellectual experience of things spiritual. It really is kind of an encounter.
Yeah. And so part of the reason that you wrote this book, I know that you had said that you're an atheist. You basically didn't even believe in half of the stuff that you're now doing. And so, but you had actually had a channel and explained to folks what channeling is and how it kind of came to you.
Well, I'm a clairaudient. I'm a clairaudient and an empath. I'm also a college teacher. I've had this very other life for my entire adult life. But when I was in my mid-20s, I had an energetic experience that left me seeing lights around people, or at least I assumed the experience that I had was the cause of that. But it was an experience of energy moving through my body. People said it sounded a bit like a spontaneous Kundalini awakening or something like that. But it is what it was. I studied a form of healing, and I found out that when I had my hands on people, I started to hear things for them. Mm-hmm. So I was opening up as a clairaudient, and then I started to feel what was going on in their bodies. Mm-hmm. So I was opening up as a clairsentient as well. And I didn't know what these things were, except they were happening. Yeah. And that was sort of the path. So the clairaudience became channeling as I began to refine the ability to hear, which really had a lot to do with trusting it and continuing to show up for this stuff in spite of an enormous amount of resistance on my part, frankly, over the years. I just kept showing up. Not always believing in what was coming through, and often wondering why people were bothering to come and be parted to these things. I did a group in my apartment for many years, but it was my group. I was learning through it as well. So finally, they started dictating entire books. So actually, I didn't write any of these books. I sat there in a chair and closed my eyes and put the recorder on. And it's a woman in Berkeley, California on the phone, and the guides literally tell the whole books to her. And then they're typed up. And they're bound. They're not even edited. So the whole books are really the unedited transcripts of these teachings. And the teachings come in book form. They're not a compilation. The guides say, we have a book to write, and kaboom, 30 days later or 2 weeks later, however long it takes for that specific book, the book is delivered fully.
I've had some experiences with channeling. I've actually, why I was smiling when you're telling the stories, because I've actually had a similar thing. I was taking a Reiki class and feeling like, oh, you have something in your right. And I didn't know I'd even had half of these abilities until I did some type of energetic healing. And why I was smiling was because I had kind of a similar type of experience, and you don't know. And it's kind of strange that all this stuff is coming to you, frankly. But you had these, the first book was the book of I Am the Word, and then there's this book of love and creation, and then there's the book of knowing and worth. So and oftentimes when I channel, I don't remember anything. People say to me, well, do you remember you said to me? I'm like, I'm not saying anything. Like something came to me, through me. I don't even remember. Do you remember half of the stuff that you're saying as you're dictating these things?
About half. I think that's a fair amount. I mean, I'm odd. I hear, and when on the transmission as it comes, I whisper it as it comes. And then I repeat it in a louder voice. And I've been doing this for many years. And it's an awkward way of channeling, or some people say it's an awkward way. For me, it's just the way that I do it. When I'm channeling directly, the energy is so high for me sometimes, and it feels so completely out of control for me that I sustain that maybe for 15, 20 minutes at a time, and that's usually in front of a very large group. The guides at some point will begin to really work directly. Then I really don't remember any of it. With the whisper and the repeating, which is how things are coming, I'm hearing the repeat. I hear that much. But, what's odd about the way that I work is because I'm hearing everything in phrases. I say it's like reading a lot of fortune cookies, one after the other, after the other, after the other. So, and hoping that it's all making sense as it adds up. I don't know until I'm typing up the transcripts of the lectures that comprise the books whether the teaching is actually even coherent. I have somebody on the phone, I say, does that make sense? And she said, it made perfect sense. But until it's typed up, I don't see how the chapter is built or how the teaching is laid out, because I'm so busy trying to hear the next word or the next grouping of words. It's hard for you to comprehend
at a conscious level, as well as be an empty slate to actually, or empty vessel to actually receive the information. So when you actually read this stuff, how hard is it for you to live? What is in, it's so amazing that you have this incredible, phenomenal information coming through you. And I presume that the channeler has to have some sense of what these things mean before you actually articulate them. How far in advance are you of the topics that you're teaching?
Not at all. I think that there are certain things that they teach that I'm comfortable with. And very often, the books, historically the books were teachings that were sort of being brought through from stuff that I'd heard some of in teachings that they brought before. So it wasn't entirely new material. And then there's a place where it's completely new. Like halfway through the book, they start going into stuff they've never talked about before. They're channeling a new book through me now. It's called the Book of Mastery. And this is pretty much all new. Wow. And I'm having to sort of really hold on to my seat because it's challenging me personally at a very deep level. I feel in some ways that I've had a very uneasy relationship with this work. It's not that I dismiss it. I like the fact that my work as a psychic and as an empath is provable. It's been documented. There's lots of video of me sort of stepping into other people. And I'm a physical empath or a physical medium. So if you wonder what's going on with your sister and you give me your sister's name, I can step into your sister and I'll start to resemble her, and hear her. And that's part of what I do. That's helped me to trust the phenomena of the channeling that works through me. But I used to say, I'm the laziest student of the bunch, and my way, I think, of sort of dealing with the enormity of what's coming through me at times has been to distance myself from it a little bit. Mm-hmm. And what I'm finding at the stage of my life and my own development is I can't do that anymore. Yeah. I really can't. I'm being called to do the work in significant ways that are not necessarily what I want. I can't rest on it. My guides say now about what they're teaching, they say, this isn't convenient stuff. Right. This isn't convenient. They said if you want to, there was something they talked about in the last book, and they say, if you want to play the game of the light, you can play the game of the light, which means you've got a flickering lantern, swinging back and forth in front of a door that's just partially open. Right. If you want this, you can do it. It's there for all of us, but we have to realize what it means and what's being asked of it, which is frankly, I think, to let go of who we think we are. Yeah. And who we think we are is vastly smaller than they would say what we truly are.
So, and that's the part that right now when you're writing the book of mastery that you're realizing, you were talking about before about just being seen. Just been one of my big things, actually, probably for the last 3 or 4 months, like being seen, and so you're saying they're challenging you on that idea. What can you give us some specifics so we get a sense of how you experience writing these books?
It's again, the books aren't written; they're dictated. Yeah. So, I've been channeling this stuff around. I guess they've been saying, the claim of identity that you are making is what you go into all of your encounters with. Right. And it's the expectation you carry. So I'm the teacher, I'm the student, or I'm the man who delivers the groceries, or the one who cooks the food. But these are all these different ways that we negotiate our relationships. None of these are really who we are at a true level. But our investment in these other identities is how we actually move through our experience, and we have expectations of what they will deliver back to us. Right. And what ends up happening, or what's been happening for me, is I'm realizing that most of it's a bunch of junk. I was doing a book signing in Asheville about 3 weeks ago. And I had a really rough few months. My back went out. I couldn't walk. I was ice packing at the book signing. And I was sitting there, and there was this really lovely woman reading my bio in front of these people in this voice that was very important, and she was making me sound very important. And I was in the back of the room, and I went, I don't know who the hell she's talking about. And I didn't know anymore who she meant. Right. I mean, I got that that's who I was on paper, but I really got at a much, much deeper level. That's not who I am. And I'm somebody that used to, in his life, have an investment in those things. I thought they made me okay in the world. And all it takes is a couple of people sort of slamming you, and you go, okay, what am I trying to protect? What's my need to be perceived? And the reality is, as I let go of that, there's a real sense of sadness because I've invested much of my life in an identity that I'm now seeing is transitional at best. Yeah. I mean, I could have been the hot guy when I was 25, but I'm the 53-year-old guy now. I mean, that's who I was. This is who I am. Yeah. And this will change as well. So the amount of emphasis that we put on these externals. Anyway, all that stuff is getting challenged now in every part of my life. And while I'm not comfortable with it, I get that it's the teaching. I get it. I don't think it has to be hard. Yeah. But I think the attachment at the level that we are to attach to our identity, our stuff, who we think we're supposed to be. And the guides would say who we think we're supposed to be has very little to do with who we are. It's just the stuff that we were taught. Yeah. So we've inherited that, and we continue to perpetuate it.
It's interesting because, I think that when people are reading, when I wonder what the energy that's being transmitted is doing, but I wonder, I think it's healing. And so even while you're writing and healing those aspects of yourself that are still resisting, that egoic part of you that's still resisting. Totally. Yeah. I think that's a beautiful thing. It's nice that I'm surprised, but it's nice that this is the first book that you're able to do that. To actually that this mastery book is the way that you're able to experience that.
Well, I think the last book was actually addressing me where I was, and I was getting that the Book of Knowing and Worth. I mean, the guides are saying there that, you can't really claim your own divinity or your own alignment to the Creator if you believe that you're unworthy of it. And we live in a culture where we're mostly told that we're unworthy of this, if it even exists. And that you need somebody to take you there. You have to go to the shaman, or you have to go to the priest, or you have to go to the rabbi, or somebody who's got the special dispensation to make it okay for you to walk through that doorway.
Yeah.
And the guides say, that's not what it is. You're the doorway, really. And your claiming your own divine worth is really what will support you. So they actually sort of helped me begin to go there in a way that I don't think I had, because I wasn't all that aware that I needed to. I mean, it's very easy, I think, sometimes to keep your spirituality over there as an idea or something that you do when you have the time to attend to it.
Right.
But really, it's who you are. Your consciousness is who you are and how you're expressing all the time. High and low and in between is what they say.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's interesting because I don't think I've done a ton of work, right? But if you really go down, it's funny because I'm a life coach. So I coach people and I take them down the elevator shaft, where it's like, I feel like I need to, write this great book. Why? Because if so, then my friends will finally, earn the respect of my parents. Okay, why is that important? Well, because if I do that, then they'll have proof that they love me. Why? What would happen if they didn't love you? Then I'd be worthless and I'd be nobody and I have no worth and I have no value and I don't really even exist. This is where almost if you go through almost 90% of my coaching calls and you take people down the elevator shaft, it's this, right? I have no value. I don't exist. And so I don't think we do. I mean, we all have this kind of implanted bit that this is true. I'm unworthy, I'm of no value, I have no reason to exist. I mean, if you really are truthful to yourself and you go down the elevator shaft, probably 90% of the things that you do day in, day out are to hide this kind of core.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I completely agree with you. But you see, what my guides would say, which is where it veers off into this other territory, is the self that needs to prove that isn't who you really are. Mm-hmm. That's the construct. That's the personality. That's the personality of the egoic self that needs all this stuff. What the guides say, and this is the teaching that I'm just starting to finally get, and they've been talking about it through all these books, but it's just really starting to hit home. The divine self is who we really are. Mm-hmm. They can call it, they call it the true self, the Christed self, the creative self. You can call it whatever you want, they say. It doesn't really matter. But that's who we truly are. And they say that the divine self, or the true self, has no need to seek approval, could care less, truthfully, and is never afraid because fear doesn't exist at that level. Mm-hmm. So it's a really interesting litmus test to find out where we're coming from. But they're trying to teach us to come from the true self.
I'm not there yet. I can actually say I'm part of the problem. Sorry to say, I'm trying to change, but I can say I'm part of the problem. When I look at this book, and the main premise of this book, I think, is that we're living in a state of fear, almost all the time. Most of our actions are driven by fear, and really, what would it be if we were coming from a state of love? And I thought, what is it? I need to read and figure out what the heck I need to do, and I was wondering if you were to talk to your guides. I mean, if they were to say, "What is the state of the union at this moment, according to your guides?" What would they say? We just had Obama had a State of the Union. What would the State of the Union be according to your guides?
I'd have to go in and ask. I presume to speak for them sometimes, and it's like that wasn't it. And so. The State of the Union, frankly, is who you are, is who you say you are. And what you claim is what you bring to yourself, and how you know yourself, and how you know yourself sets up the. So they're saying sets up the expectations. They're saying for the life you live, the state of the union. The state of the union is the state of who is the state of who you are independently. And they're saying independently and collectively in the collective agreement. And the collective agreement to be in transformation, which is what changes your world. They're saying each one of you contributes to this by claiming yourself in a higher way, but until you realize who you are at your essence is unafraid. You're saying you will continue to create in fear, and what you see around you, and what you see around you that you concur with, and you agree with every day. Our structure is born in fear. Our structure is born in fear. When you those things, when you're no longer aligning to those things because you know better, you're operating a higher way. You're operating at a higher way. You call the new to you. You call the new to you, and that becomes the new agreement. Period. So that's what I get. I don't know if any of that made any sense, but that's what I got.
Yeah, I was just so mesmerized by your channeling. But that was beautiful. That was amazing. Wow. Okay.
That's just sort of how it happens. I mean, it's, I'm articulate up to a point, and then there's stuff that's really out of my league. And most of what they talk about, I mean, really, for the most part, they only come through in interviews when I go, I don't know what the hell to say.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer to this. I can reiterate their teachings up to a point.
Yeah.
I'm getting better at sort of being able to describe the essence of what they talk about to people when they ask. But that's very different than when they come through with what they have to say.
Yeah, I mean, what I got from that was that it's about what I'm trying to actually. It's funny too because when I hear it, it lands on so many different levels. It doesn't necessarily even land on my conscious mind. It lands someplace deeper than that, and then I have to construct what it did to my conscious mind. If that makes any sense?
It makes perfect sense, yes.
But it feels like what I think you said is that, the state of the union, we think of what is the state of the world? What's happening right now in our society. And you think of current events. And the interesting thing I got from what you just said is it's not necessarily the current events. You are the current event.
That's it.
You are the current event. And the fear you're generating and the love that you're generating, that's the main point. It doesn't matter what's happening with ISIS or what's happening with, the latest movie or the fads. It's all in the inside. That's what I got from it. What did you get from it? Or can you recall the 50% that you heard from it?
I got the gist of it, I think. I think one of the things they're talking about now a lot is collective agreements, what we collectively agree with, and that we're actually sort of concurring with all of the fear that we're being taught to buy into. And as we do that, we're actually reinforcing the very things that we say that we want to change. So as we begin to reframe or recognize the higher or the truth, the guides would say the truth in every situation, which is really often not the surface level. I mean, the guides say, when you know that someone is holy, because everybody is, the idea of harming them is insane. It really is crazy. But we've moved so far away from a sense of our own divinity that it's very, very easy to deny it in everybody else. In my guides say again and again, you can't be the light and hold another in darkness. You just can't do it. It's a big lie, and that's arrogance. And I'm pissed as hell at some people some days. I really am. But I know that when I am, I'm calling myself into the very space that I would like to put them in. Do you know what I mean? I go there too. And that's this whole teaching of forgiveness that they're really on now too, which they've been talking about for a while, but now I really get it. What we don't forgive, we claim to ourselves. And that becomes our own hindrance to our own true expression. So I think when they talk about the big structures, they're talking about this stuff. But it happens at the individual level. And then at the collective level, and the things are always working in tandem.
Well, the chapter that really got to me, right here, where I thought, and what you just said reminded me of that, it's the one on judgment. Because I'm from the East Coast, I'm super cynical, but But what is the cost of doing that, right? That, oh, the waitress was so awful at that restaurant. I can't believe we shouldn't even tip her this huge amount because she's just an awful waitress. I actually was saying that to my husband. We went out to my birthday dinner, and we went to a very nice restaurant, where the bill, the tip was gigantic, and I thought, oh, please don't tip her a huge amount. And my youngest son said, why? And I said, because she was a really bad waitress. And he said, why was she a bad waitress? And I said, because at a restaurant like this, you expect to actually have a higher level of service. And he said, well, why would you expect that? I said, I don't know. I guess that's what I'm used to. And he said, oh, okay. And because he was really trying to understand the mindset that I had. And I actually read your chapter, and I went back to him, and I said, hey, honey, I want to tell you that you actually know more than I do, because here I was actually judging this waitress as not being a good waitress. And I said, maybe today's her bad day because it's Valentine's Day, she's crushed, all these reasons. But really, who am I to judge her on her worth generally? I mean, I could say my experience was not great, and I said, and you were right, honey. You were right to question me and question what right did I have to judge that.
Well, but I think there are two things to look at. There's a difference between judging someone and perhaps judging their performance. So if I hire somebody to do some work for me and they don't work for me, I'm not obligated to rehire them.
Right.
I'm assuming, they didn't fulfill their part of the engagement,
right.
But it's not for me to decide who they are. That's what's not for me to decide. You see what I mean?
Yes.
The guides say, what you judge, you fear. And if you want to know what you fear, look at what you judge. It's a pretty easy way to sort of begin to go into this thing. But yeah, I mean, I'm a New Yorker too. And sometimes I say, and when I'm doing workshops, I'm the person you don't want behind you in the bank when there's a long line. You don't want me there. I'm a pain in the ass, and I know it,
right.
But I also know that I know it. And I also know, that at my essence, there is a compassion there. It just is.
Yeah.
But I also think that that's in everybody. I think we're all capable of this,
Yeah.
I saw some YouTube viral video, one of those things. It was some guy who put this morning. He stood out on the street with a sign that said, I trust you, do you trust me, free hugs, and he was blindfolded.
Mm-hmm.
And he just stood there on the street,
wow.
being open. And it was wonderful to watch who came up and who allowed that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To a stranger, I mean, this all sounds fuzzy, and I'm not a very fuzzy kind of guy, but I get the judgment thing. But I think there's a difference between judging somebody for who they are. And most people, when they're acting out, are frightened. Right. When I'm acting out, I'm usually frightened of something. There's something I don't know what to do with. So I'm demonstrating it through my lower consciousness because I haven't taken the time to go into a higher way.
But don't you think, so here I am judging this waitress, and granted, I don't have to pay her more just because I feel guilty. That's not what I'm saying either. But it's who am I to judge this waitress anyways? And I think when you do that, when you feed into those thoughts, that you are feeding into the fear. Don't you think? I mean,
I do.
Say is that you're going down to that vibration, and like you said, okay. So my probably fears. I'm always oriented towards service. I'm obsessiverating about service when I work with clients. So that's probably when I look at her, she's a projection of what I don't want to be. Maybe that's what I'm feeding. I don't know. I mean, if I were to do a little 2 cents analysis, that's what it'd be.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What your kid was saying was brilliant. Which is why. And interrogating why we do what we do, which is usually the missing step, and then you can find out.
Yeah.
I'm going to tune into you because now I'm wondering why you were mad at the.
No, okay, yeah, no, go ahead, tune into me and tell me what you find. I'm curious to see how you work.
I hear that it's just a simple fear of not getting your needs met.
Yeah.
And there was a sense of indignancy of you're not going to meet my needs, and that became the engagement with her. Like you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, so that became the way that you work back and forth. Now, it's going to be hard for me to tune into her without her name, but I'm just going to be curious. She had a hard day.
Yeah, I know.
Too much. And forgive me, my hunch is you were demanding.
Yeah, I'm always demanding.
There you go. That's okay too.
I know myself. I know how I'm, like you said, you in the bank. I know I'm demanding. Interesting. Yeah. So, but, in that whole exercise or in that whole experience, going back to your book, the book of love and creation, when we go down to those places, I guess the thing is you can go down to those places as long as you squeeze the juice out of it, right? If I could say, why did I go and condemn this woman? I actually knew she was having a hard day, and I still expect, given how much we were paying, that we'd get really good service. And I was sad that she had a hard day, but I guess I wasn't that compassionate because I thought I still want good service.
Yeah, but that's, you don't need to judge yourself either. But, the question is sort of, when is it okay to go to those spaces, I suppose. Maybe that's what you're asking. And what I get is, it's okay as long as you say it's okay. But the thing is, we get back the dividend from going to those places. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you mean going into the little exploration that you and I just did, which anyone can do, right? And this is not just for CJ analyzing herself. It's everyone kind of going into, when we go into the sphere places, why, and to dig out the nugget, I guess.
Exactly right. It's easily doable. And the guys just say about that, choose. If you choose to learn through the experience, you have the opportunity to move beyond it. Yeah. That's all. Yeah,
it's hard though, because as a cynical New Yorker in the background, I just am judging everything right and left each day. And I almost can't stand how much I judge. It's awful.
Can I go back to you? Because I want to see what this is about. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah? Sure.
Why not? You're first acknowledging that it's not your fault. It's sort of how you were trained. And it's also a way to protect yourself. It's a way to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And if I'm doing that, you really can't hurt me. You understand? It's a way of sort of being a negotiation. Right. And they're saying that that's accurate. And they're saying it's easily fixed, but I don't usually hear the word fix, so I don't trust the word. If you realize that this is actually being done as a way to keep yourself safe, you actually then don't have to. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
That's it. It's just that simple.
Yeah, and it's going back to the thing that you said earlier, right? We are all divine beings and we're safe.
Well, we are safe. I don't buy that. I have a lock on my door and I intend to keep it there, and I guess that's just prudent. That's not fear. But this is one of the big things that I've really been questioning lately, because I think it's at the essence of what the guides are teaching. Yeah. We are safe. But the ways that we don't perceive ourselves as safe are usually about our property or our bodies, or the ways that we've identified ourselves in positioning with others, And at a level of truth, we're safe. If we're not our bodies, and if we're not our stuff, and if we're not our job titles, who are we? Right. And that's the re-identification with the true self. And they say, the true self is safe, can never not be. The true self knows who she is anyway, and frankly is only waiting to be realized through you. Mm-hmm. That's its job, is to be expressed through you fully. Mm-hmm. Fully. Mm-hmm. The guides in the new book did a meditation, which was really interesting to me. And it was sort of, and at first I thought it was, this sort of, one of those things. It was your divine self is behind a doorway and, and face the doorway. And then I said to them, so why did you put this doorway there?
Right. Yeah. We're all safe. Why is there a doorway?
They said the doorway is not to protect you from the divine self. To protect the divine self, the doorway is a creation of the ego.
Oh, wow.
That's what it is. It's the ego seeking protection from the divine self.
Yeah.
And I went, that landed.
Yeah.
That one I got.
That's fascinating. All right, I want to go back to your book, this book again, and you talk about a lot of this is the whole metaphor is going with the flow of life, and going with the flow of life. What does that mean? Because you have this beautiful metaphor of sitting on the riverbank or jumping in the river. What does that mean to you?
It's not my metaphor.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I don't mean to keep on snapping into that mode.
It's okay. They're doing a mountain in the next book, so I should just get used to the geography being used by those without bodies. Let me see. The river is actually a metaphor for how you express yourself, and the flow is your alignment. And the flow is actually your alignment, your freedom, your freedom to be in congruence with the divine, When you're in congruence with the divine or alignment, you are in alignment with the fabric of all, to the fabric of all. You can see that. You can see that as a river if you like. You can see its expression. You can see it as your expression in consort with all that is, but who you are. But who you are is always being expressed, is always being expressed. That's what you are. That's what you are. Being an expression, level of expression, the level of expression for you to know yourselves, for you to know yourselves through is what you get to choose, is what you get to choose. Low vibration, if you wish. Low vibration, if you wish, and we use the metaphor, of sitting on the riverbank, demanding to have your way, demanding to have your way when you're in the current of the frequency of the river. When you are in the current of the frequency of the river, you are trusting the freedom. You are trusting the freedom and the source of all that is, and the source of all that is to move you where you need to be, to move you where you need to be, period. And they're saying period. Mm-hmm. That's what you get.
And it's interesting because I think inherently, even when people use those terms commonly, it is about that, right? It's going with the flow of life, going where divine is asking you to go. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because you have a whole chapter in this book about divine will and free will. And then, when you go on the internet, there's this whole thing about predestination. How do you, or what would the guide say is the difference between free will, divine will, and predestination?
That's really, when they talk about some of this in the new book, and I don't remember what they said about it, but I remember that they were talking a bit about idolatry, and sort of creating false gods. Mm-hmm. And they said, your horoscopes are fine, but they're really an outline for what could possibly be. Mm-hmm. And if you start planning your life through that, you're actually giving your authority away. You're making that bigger than all that is, Mm-hmm. So free will, I understand, is what we've been given to work with. Right. Divine will is the expression of the divine as us. That's what that is. And that's the agreement. So the alignment of the free will and the divine will, that's the key here, because what I understand is, the guides say, they can't choose for us.
So this whole idea of predestination is not even an idea. I mean, it's like
predestination. This is what they would say about that, and this is what I do recall, that there are certain things we come here in agreement to learn. Mm-hmm. There are certain lessons that we sign on for when we come here, right. And that these are things that we can attend to in different ways. Right. But that's kind of like our checklist for ourselves, mm-hmm. of the things we need to go forward with. Right. Now, I suppose that some, and I don't know that my guides have addressed this directly, but some people would say, that the divine trumps karma. Grace would trump karma, mm-hmm. too. If you want to go there. And frankly, if you want to say that there's a creator, if you want to go there, the creator is all powerful if you want to go there. Mm-hmm. Not just powerful on the days when it gives me what I want. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So what I put before that relationship is essentially what I'm creating a totem out of, or a god out of, mm-hmm. you see. Mm-hmm. So I suppose that could be predestination too. We choose much more than we think. I just ask, I heard we choose much more than we think. One thing, you're really not a victim of anything. You're always in agreement, in circumstance at one level or another. You just don't know why. You just don't know why. And they're saying because you've come to learn different things. You judge what you feel. You judge what you feel. This is what I wanted. This isn't what I wanted. It cannot be good. It cannot be good. But you're only looking at a limited picture. You can't see the whole. The reason for it. You can't see the whole. And the reason for it. They're saying to tell you this. The first book that I channeled, which was called I Am the Word, was channeled right after a really rotten professional thing happened to me, and I had just gone to bed. And Victoria Nelson, who's a colleague of mine, who'd been trying to get me to write a book about how I became clairaudient for about a year that I had no interest in doing, called me up to try to convince me to do this thing. And the guides piped in and said, no, we have a book to write. And if you take 2 weeks, we'll do it. And because I had just had my ego so completely level that I really didn't care, and suddenly I had free time, which I wasn't anticipating, I thought, why the hell not? It's an experiment. We'll see what happens. And that totally changed my life.
Wow.
But had I not done that, had I not taken the opportunity, you and I wouldn't be talking. And the other thing is, if I hadn't had that disappointment, you and I wouldn't have been talking either.
Right.
So what appeared to be the worst thing that could have happened at that moment in my life, given that perspective, was actually enormously liberating for me. And that stuff in the physical realm, we don't know what people come here to learn.
Right.
I was once doing a workshop, and somebody asked the guides a question about, they were very excited about people being given, I think, hallucinogens at the end of their life, to sort of transition them in this wonderful way. And my guides, who rarely get loud and boisterous or angry, seemed rather outraged.
Yeah.
And they said, why would you take away somebody's death? Why would you take away the integrity of somebody's death? You don't know what they're going to learn through this. So it's not, the idea of making it pretty was understandable, but not necessarily at the cost of what might be gained. Now, I don't know, that may be a controversial thing to say, and I'm half remembering a quote from a workshop about 2 years ago. But, what it showed me was, because I think it's supposed to be a certain way, because we all agree that things should be nice, or comfortable, doesn't mean that that's what's for the highest learning of the one participating in it. And the guides say we're here to learn.
So I think what I heard from your answer is, the divine will was in you having that crushing ego blow, which you didn't like. It wasn't fun. It was painful, right? That was the divine will. Your free will was saying, yeah, I'll write the book. That was your free will. And the predestined thing, who knows? Maybe you were predestined to learn about, I don't know, loss or, compassion, love, who knows? And that was the only thing that I'm hearing is kind of the idea of a predestination, is that you have somehow some people talk at a soul contract, but you come down, you try to learn higher level ideas like love, compassion, freedom.
Yeah, I think so. According to what the guides have since said is, I signed on to do these books. That's part of what I came to do in this lifetime.
Wow.
And so that was, you can say, part of my fulfilling my possible destiny. Yeah. But they also say we have free will. We can always say no.
Yeah.
It's got to be a choice. It's got to be a choice always.
But don't you ever look back in your life and go, yeah, it makes sense. You are, you teach at NYU on playwriting, right? To be a playwright. Right. And here you are, life is the play. And you're talking about the ultimate play. Don't you find that, I don't know if you go there or not, but that's where I went when I thought, wow, that's interesting. And then he writes, he's a teacher in creative writing. All this stuff is fascinating.
The first time somebody asked me, which was shortly after the first book was channeled, they said, how does your being a playwright or your having been a playwright inform your channeling? And I said, well, it doesn't. It's two different things completely. And then I actually thought about it. And when I was a young playwright, I used to put on a piece of music that felt like the play that I was writing, and I'd put it on loop for hours at a time, and then write, and just free write. And what I was actually doing was inducing trance, but I didn't realize that, And the whole idea of hearing character and becoming character as you write them, which any playwright will say that's what you do, in some ways was actually preparing me for channeling. The freaky part was I didn't know that I was really doing it.
Yeah.
I was doing a reading for some woman, and she asked about her father, and I tuned into her father, and my eyes were closed, and I heard her gasp. And I opened my eyes, she said, oh my God, you look just like him. And then I found that every time I did it, I was actually somatizing the people that were being asked about. I was like Whoopi Goldberg in Ghost, I was taking on these expressions and then hearing the dynamics.
Yeah.
And so I feel that, it was all in some ways part of my development I'm doing this now for whatever reasons. This is what I'm doing now. And I'm only doing it now because I truly don't think about it a whole lot.
Yeah.
I just keep showing up for it. If I were to think about it too much, I think I get too worried.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because this is such a wild diversion from the world of academia, right?
Yeah, it is. And, it's also just all teaching. And frankly, any good teacher would say or know that any good teaching is an act of love. Any real teacher knows that, I think, in their bones. It's not an act of the intellect. It's an act of seeing the potential in your students, and knowing that they can be realized in a higher way. And so what my guides do is they do that in a way that I don't think I'm capable of. I can do it with a script, but I don't know that I can do it with a life. My life is certainly, still, under renovation, and it may always be, and maybe that's perfectly fine. I don't think I've arrived yet.
I think that's encouraging, though, don't you? Because you can still be on a spiritual path. And in some ways, you have this higher wisdom that you know of, even though you may not even arrive there yourself. But it just means that it's within you. So it's a possibility, right? Because where else would it be coming from unless, like you said, you have that divinity within yourself?
Yeah. I think that's true. And I feel that, it's not about knowing it all now. It's about being where we are. The guides would say, where we are is the only place we can know anything from, So it's not about being an expert, and God forbid it should be about being a guru. I mean, the guides say that those days are over. We're really being called to claim our own.
I'm so appreciative that you say that, because it's hard. I actually don't think I even talk to anyone who has that kind of mentality, like I'm a guru, follow me. I find that completely not helpful at all, because we are all gurus. So when you put yourself separate from other people, then it makes it seem like an unachievable goal. Like I have to follow you in order to get there. No, I mean, what you're saying is, read what they're saying. It's not even what you're saying. Read the transmission of what they're saying, and this is a path to get there. And you're still trying to get there yourself, as am I. I think that's, I don't know, I think it's just somewhat much more helpful as a way of helping people. So I'm glad that you're approaching it in the way that you do. It's the way that I approach things. Because I really don't like the whole idea of people setting themselves apart.
I don't either.
It's about. Haven't we already had enough of that? It's called religion. In my opinion. In my humble opinion. Thank you so much for your time. We've been talking to Paul Selig about the Book of Love, the second book, the Book of Knowing and Worth, and we got a wonderful, wonderful preview of his newest series, the Book of Mastery. Is that it?
That's the one.
Thank you so much for your time, especially since I know you're under the weather, so I appreciate it so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks so much. It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.